Hey everybody, welcome to the GameChanger Lacrosse Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Evoli. The GameChanger Lacrosse Podcast is about talking to people who have dedicated their life to the game of lacrosse and learning about who they are, how they got to where they are today, and what they do to improve themselves and their teams. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at GC Sports, and if you're a coach or a parent, check out GameChanger Team Manager in the App Store. You can ditch the emails and spreadsheets. The free GameChanger Team Manager app streamlines communication, scheduling, and live scoring into one easy-to-use app. GameChanger Team Manager is 100% free for your entire team. Learn more at gc.com/team manager or search for GameChanger Team Manager in the App Store. Today in the show, we have the head coach of Bucknell women's lacrosse, Remington Steele. Coach Steele was a graduate of Limestone University, where his team made 3 Final Four appearances. He started his coaching career at Limestone before moving on to be the lead assistant at Vermont. He then went to Furman, where he was the goalie's coach, defensive coordinator, and recruiting coordinator. Then, in the summer of 2017, he took over as the head coach of Bucknell women's lacrosse. Coach Steele and I get a chance to talk about a lot of things like learning by doing, getting buy-in, working towards a common goal, and much more. Here's my interview with Coach Steele. Coach Steele, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to talk, but let's get started like I always do. How'd you get started playing lacrosse?
I started playing lacrosse in spring of 8th grade. I played ice hockey and just switched to a new school, and we didn't have a hockey team or anything like that. And I'd had some health issues as a young kid with my kidneys, so lacrosse was always on the list of sports that I was never supposed to play, never allowed to play. And I kind of took, going to this new school, a lot of the kids at the school played lacrosse, all that stuff, so I kind of took that as my opportunity to kind of guilt trip my mom into letting me play lacrosse.
So 8th grade was the first time that you picked up a stick?
Yep, that's right.
Gotcha.
I did have a stick. Like I said, I was never allowed to play for a team or in a league or anything like that. But, my mom, when I was younger, got me a stick, and ironically, it was a girl's stick. So everything kind of came back full circle, but I'd throw around with it a little bit from time to time. But for the most part, 8th grade was the first time I really, ever played with other people or anything like that.
Gotcha. And then, so how did you work on picking up the game? Who taught you how to play?
I think there were a bunch of people that played a big part. My neighbor next door, he was a couple years older than me, was on, the high school team at the time. So he kind of helped show me the ropes a little bit. Right. And then, Colin Cutler and Bill Elliott and Craig Anderson were my high school, middle school coaches. They run the Hillcrest High School program out in Dallas, Texas, and they've done a lot of really great things for the sport. And, taking it into like the South Dallas area and the public school area in Dallas, where it wasn't super prevalent before that. And, they did a really, really good job of, making the program and making the sport accessible to different types of people. But they're also great leaders and coaches and all that. So they were a huge asset to me as I was kind of learning to play.
Gotcha. And you mentioned a few before, but what other sports did you play at that age?
So, I played a little bit of everything, as I was younger. But I played basketball and stuff like that until everyone kept growing and I didn't. But primarily I played tennis, golf, hockey, soccer, lacrosse were kind of my main ones. I played, and then once kind of middle school ended and you had to kind of start focusing a little bit more throughout high school, I played soccer and lacrosse and ice hockey.
Gotcha. And then at what point did lacrosse start becoming the sport where you started thinking, hey, this is something I might be able to play at the next level, especially since you started playing so late?
Yeah, I think for me, lacrosse, I'd kind of loved lacrosse since I first saw it. I used to watch like MILL games and NLL games on TV when I was a kid, like box games. And so just growing up, I always loved it and loved the idea of it. So I think once I kind of started playing, I was all in. It immediately after, my first week of playing, it pretty much jumped to the top of my priority list.
Right. Gotcha.
And so, so 8th grade I played, I was a midi and an attacker. I kind of bounced between those two roles, and then, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to college and play college lacrosse and all that stuff. I knew, I really wasn't a great hockey player. I was a good skater, but, not super skilled or big enough, so I loved hockey, but I knew I wasn't really going too far with it. And then soccer, I love soccer, and still to this day it's my favorite thing to watch and all that. But again, I was an okay soccer player, and so but I loved lacrosse more than any of them immediately, and so I kind of went all in as soon as I started playing. And then I think, my freshman year, when I switched positions, I switched and became a goalie. And, I was a decent attacker, midfielder, whatever it was, but, I took to goalie pretty quickly. And so I think that's when it really went from like, okay, this is something I hope to make happen, to like, okay, this is something I think I can really do.
Gotcha. And so I'm curious, so what, around that time when you start playing lacrosse for the first time, what did you do to sort of pick up the game, to sort of make up for playing the game so late or starting so late?
I think starting the game late was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Just in a sense of like, realistically, it's awesome to pick it up early. It's awesome to start playing in, 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever grade. But for me, starting a little bit later was great because I felt like I had so much ground to make up. I think the fact that I picked it up late made me very motivated. And the fact that not only did I pick it up late, but I was from a non-traditional area, it made me very motivated. And every single day, as much as I could, I was out there getting extra work in. I don't think in those first couple of years I played, I can't even think about how many days went by where I didn't play, in some capacity, whether it was wall ball, whether it was, shooting, whether it was, when I started playing goalie, seeing shots and working on outlets and different things like that. So I think, the fact that I started playing late was a blessing for me because it just kind of lit that fire underneath me and made me, motivated and made me feel like, okay, if you really want to do something with this, if you really want this to be, your ticket, you better get to work.
Right. So it gave you a little bit of almost a chip on your shoulder.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. And I think, that paired with, I knew it was from a non-traditional area. I knew I knew at that time I had to work hard, just to, have an opportunity. Whereas, if you're maybe from the Northeast or from one of those more traditional areas, you can kind of fall into opportunities. And for me, I think I never dreamed of what my life became, what my career became. I was like, if I can get in at any college program, I'll be happy.
Right.
Makes sense. And so that was, I think that was just kind of where I was coming from with everything. And then again, pair that with the fact that, I was never supposed to play lacrosse in the first place.
Right. Gotcha.
So, I think all those things kind of contributed to me just, having a little bit of a chip on the shoulder and wanting to work hard and being committed to everything I was doing.
Right. So can you tell us how you ended up at Limestone?
Yeah. So, freshman year, I played at Robert Morris University in Pittsburgh. So I played there my freshman year, and I made Canada's U19 team. So I'm a Canadian citizen. I grew up in Dallas, but both my parents are Canadian. We spent a lot of time up there, all that stuff. So I made Canada's U19 team. I just went to open tryouts out in Toronto and made that team. And so I was at Robert Morris, and then played in the 2008 U19 World Championships. We won a silver medal. I did really well. And, but unfortunately that summer and into that fall afterwards, we had a lot of family issues going on and a lot of different things like that happening where situations changed. And, Robert Morris wasn't the best fit for me anymore. Right. And I loved it there. And Andrew McMahon, who's doing a great job there, was the assistant coach at the time, and Bear Davis, who coached the Ohio Machine, was the head coach at the time, and loved both of them and all that. So it was a great program. Really, really grateful for my time there. But, I kind of saw leaving Robert Morris as my first adult decision in life and me having to do something to really help my family. And so I ended up going to Limestone. And again, best decision I ever made was going to Limestone. And, the coaching staff there was phenomenal. I had Coach Serino, who's the athletic director there now. He was great. And then my senior year, JB Clark, who's been there and been obviously incredibly successful since getting there, came in and he was awesome. And, Chris Barrett was our recruiting coordinator and got me there. And he's at Belmont Abbey now, who's been doing a good job with them. So, Limestone was a great opportunity. And I think they saw me, that Team Canada and being successful there kind of opened the door for me being able to transfer and then being aware of me and all that.
Right. So it sounds like, you had a little bit of a family issue, which, contributed to you transferring schools. But I'm curious, because you had the experience at two different schools, what advice do you give today to incoming freshmen about how they should think through that decision when they're, deciding on what school they should go to make sure that it's a right fit?
I think the biggest thing is, it has to be the right fit for you. And you have to think, what do you want out of your career? What do you want out of your experience? You know what I mean? Because again, I played Division I, I played Division II. I went to Robert Morris. It was a newer program at the time. But we were starting to get some good wins and be a little bit more competitive and all that stuff. But, there at RMU, we were playing in a situation where if you win the conference championship, that was the best thing you could ever hope for. Right. Which is a huge accomplishment, right? It's really difficult to win a conference championship, especially in Division I. You make the tournament, you're on TV, all that stuff. It's great, but at the end of the day too, when I went to Limestone and we're number one in the country and we're now expected to win our conference championship and competing for national championships and playing in Final Fours and national championship games and things like that, it's a different experience. And it's one that I absolutely loved and adored, and it taught me so much about myself and teamwork and working towards a common goal and things like that. And then on top of that, it's a small school, and for me, I went to a small high school. It was a tight-knit community, all that stuff. So that was comfortable for me. So I think at the end of the day, you've got to look at it from all angles. And unfortunately, I feel like, hopefully with these new recruiting rules, that'll kind of change and people will know a little bit more what they're looking for, and a little bit more what's kind of important, what really matters to them. But the unfortunate thing is too many, I think, kids make their recruiting decisions based off of, what are my friends going to think? Is this going to be a good picture to post on social media? Is this going to impress people? What's their locker room like? Oh, they got iPads in their lockers. I'm going there. That type of stuff. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's cool for a little bit, but what I found is it doesn't matter how nice or how bad your facilities are, things like that. At the end of the day, it's just going to become normal to you.
Right.
And so you could have the best setup you could ever imagine. You could have all the bells and whistles and all the technology and the newest, greatest things, blah, blah, blah. But after a while, that allure is going to is going to, kind of die off, and it's just going to become normal. And then you're just going to be living that life, and you're going to have to decide, is that really the place that makes you happy? Because all those other things that seem so cool when you're going through the process, you find out maybe they don't really matter as much as you thought they would.
Your recommendation would be, the players should think more about the experience that they want, or what the experience is going to be like in college, what experience they're hoping for.
Right. What do you want out of your experience? What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to do? Do you want to go to a school like, we talk to girls all the time that are, I'm getting recruited by North Carolina, Duke, or Syracuse, or whatever. And it's like, that's awesome. Right. If you have that opportunity, if you have that experience, that's great. And if you're cool to go there, and maybe you may not ever start a game, you may play 4 games your career.
Right.
That type of stuff. And some people are great with that. And, I'm in no position to tell them that's not what you should want, because some people just want to be a part of that, like, really successful team and be along for the ride and be great practice players and all that. And I support that. And those people are important. That's a huge asset to the team, and that's great. Right. But then some people also want to be the star player.
Right.
They want to be the girl. They want to be the guy. They want to be the go-to person. So, yeah, maybe you were getting recruited by these Division I schools where you could just be another guy, or you could go to this Division II school and be an all-star and set some records and compete for national championships and things like that, or go to a lower Division I school or different things, So I don't think the positive thing about it is there's not a right or wrong answer.
Mm-hmm. Right. Gotcha.
There's not a right or wrong answer. It's whatever you want.
Right.
It's whatever your experience is. And, just like people like different foods and different colors and things like that, people want different experiences and want different things. And that's what's so great about the whole process. It's just important that you're looking at it from the right perspective.
Right. And the important thing is that, the girls or guys, they need to decide for themselves what's going to work for them.
Right. Because again, this person's path, like your teammate's path may not be your path.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And then the only 2 other pieces of advice that I kind of consistently try to throw out there and try to make sure people understand is that, one, the recruiting process is kind of crazy. So you run into kids, we talk to kids all the time that are like, oh, well, all these girls on my team are committing and I want to commit, or this kid just committed to this school and I feel like I'm way better than her and I don't have any offers, or I don't have as many offers, or whatever. And I understand, like, I was like that when I was in high school too, and I understand how difficult it can be and how frustrating it is and all that. But at the end of the day, the recruiting process is really difficult. Like, you got to think about it from a perspective of, for a college coach to see you play is very difficult.
Right.
And especially if you want them to see you play, like, you have to hope that they're watching that field in that half at that time when you make that move, and that they're paying attention and not writing a note or something like that. So at the end of the day, like, that's why all these high school coaches and club coaches and college coaches are all saying, like, if you really like someone, make sure you have a highlight tape, right? Make sure you get to camps and clinics and things like that, because in a lot of cases, recruiting at these big, massive tournaments is important, but a lot of it's dumb luck too, in a sense of that coach just happened to see it, but at the end of the day too, on the flip side of it, right? So, yeah, in some cases that may work against you if there's a school you really, really want to go to, because the odds of that happening are so low, that's where you got to get out to those camps and clinics and stuff like that. But on the flip side, the really cool thing about these big tournaments is someone's going to see you,
right?
And then you may get an opportunity from some of these schools that you never knew existed, or you never knew anything about them. They may have been not anywhere near your list, and then they reach out, you start doing research, you're like, okay, maybe this is a good place, you visit, you fall in love with it, all that stuff. So it's kind of a crazy, the recruiting process a little bit crazy.
Right.
It's very random and very, I guess like a game of chance, at the end of the day. But, I guess that's where you got to just have to have faith that everything's going to work out the way it's supposed to.
Right. So let's drill down on this just a little bit. So I'm curious, would you recommend for a young guy or girl who's thinking about college, let's say they're the sophomores or juniors in high school, would you recommend like they pick their top 5 to 7 schools, maybe attend a few of their camps, and then hope to fill in the blank pieces at tournaments? Is that sort of like the formula that you would recommend they follow?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way to go about it. I think that's a good way to go about it, is really sit down and make a list. But, again, write out those priorities for you. Right. Write out, maybe make a couple columns, write out your non-negotiables. Mm-hmm. I got my non-negotiables. I want this major. I want this size school. I want to be in this part of the country, whatever. Right. Mm-hmm. So if you have those non-negotiables, that's a really good thing, because that'll help you keep everything in perspective too, especially as more and more options start to come in. Right. And then, okay, hey, this is what I think I want, and then these are the things that I know I don't want. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you have that, obviously everything changes from time to time and stuff like that, and viewpoints change and all that. But I think that's a really good way to kind of lay it out there, and then start doing research. For example, if every kid just goes, okay, my top 5 are Maryland, Northwestern, Princeton, Syracuse, and, North Carolina, right? Well, that's probably a pretty tough road to go. Right. Because a lot of people are going to have those as their top 5. Right. And you're competing against really every other kid in the country. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think it's really good to spread it out a little bit, give yourself options, explore different types of schools, different sizes, different, I don't want to say different types of commitment levels, but, different types of programs, I guess you could say, different types of conferences, that mm-hmm. type of stuff. Gotcha. And then my other advice is, when a school reaches out to you, don't blow off anyone, at least look into it. And, if they send you an email or if they give you a call, always be appreciative, always mm-hmm. be, friendly, professional, all that stuff, because again, all of us coaches know each other. Right. Absolutely. And if I don't know that coach, right, there's a pretty good chance there's like 1 degree of separation between us. Right. Right. I'm pretty sure I know someone that knows someone for everyone in the country. Right. Right. So I think it gets around, coaches talk. We don't have a whole lot going on when we sit on those sidelines for about 10 hours a day all summer. Right. So, we talk to each other and we'll say, hey, I had this phone call. You'll never believe how that went. Right. And this, that, and the other. So, you have heard, unfortunately, of certain kids not having the best reputations because of how they've handled certain situations, and all that stuff. So I think it's just important. Like, it's a really good opportunity for you to start learning professional relationship building and mm-hmm. how to present yourself and all that. Right. And so one final question on the recruiting aspect. Let's say a kid is reaching out to you. They haven't had the opportunity to go to a camp yet. Maybe it's even before that. And you mentioned you'd like them to send a highlight reel, but what does that outreach look like? How would you prefer that? An email with transcripts and a full game and a highlight reel, or, what does that look like? What do you want from them? Yeah. Everyone's different, right? Everyone's different. Every coach looks for different things, wants different things, all that stuff. I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing is, unless they're like from Australia or England or somewhere where they're not super accessible to actually see them play, very few people are going to get recruited strictly off of highlight tapes. Right. So having a highlight tape is awesome because it's a really great way for us to reference you, to check back on you, to get really interested, right? When you send that first email, hey coach, I'm playing this tournament. I'd love for you to come see me play, include that highlight tape in there, because then we can, check in on you and know what we're getting into and know what to expect. And then it's also great because then let's say we go out there and we really love what we see. Not every coach is going to be at that tournament, right, from that staff. So it's a great way for me to be like, hey, I saw this kid. She was crushing it. Like, here's her highlight tape, and then the rest of our staff can look at it, right? Or especially when it's assistants going out on the road, having to come back to the head coach and say, hey, here's this kid, check her out, whatever it may be. So I think, every coach wants different things. Every coach handles it differently. But from my perspective, I don't think the emails need to be super long, short, quick, to the point. My perspective on it is I don't need schedules. Like, just tell me what tournament you're at, what team you play for, what number you are, and then we'll find you from there.
Gotcha.
And then, include a highlight tape, all that, give us a little bit of background. And, if you can put anything in there that makes it really look like you did some research on the school, you know what you're asking about, that's a bonus, right? But, yeah.
Gotcha. Makes sense. So let's jump in, to your coaching career a little bit. So first, what made you want to start coaching?
I think going through the process, or just through high school, through recruiting, all that stuff, I think it was just something that I always thought about. So I knew I either wanted to be a coach, a sports agent, or a defense attorney were the three things that I think I wanted to be.
Right.
So I was looking at it, have to go to law school for two of them. I wasn't the best student in the world. So I kind of just fell into the coaching aspect of it. And, I think that's what I really wanted to do the most anyway.
Gotcha.
And so I wanted to keep it going. And so when I graduated, I moved back to Dallas, and I had been working for Chris Saran, who runs Iron Horse Lacrosse out of Dallas. Basically my whole, through high school, through college, all that stuff. He was a great goalie, and my family, we couldn't necessarily afford the lessons, so he would let me work his clinics when I was in high school, like moving goals around and doing registrations and stuff like that, and then he'd give me lessons in return.
Right.
So I had a good relationship with him all through high school, college, all that stuff, and then when I graduated, I jumped in with him and helped him start running Iron Horse full time. And during that time, I also became a girls' high school varsity coach. And, things just kind of took off from there.
Gotcha.
But I think, I did, when I was in college, Limestone is very athlete centered. So I was a sports management major, and I had a coaching minor. And for my coaching minor, I had to do an internship, and I ended up doing it with our women's lacrosse program. And Scott Tucker out there, and he just kind of showed me the ropes and showed me what college lacrosse on the back end was really like. And that's when I kind of thought, like, that's what I want to do someday.
Gotcha. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit just so I make sure that I get you out of here on time. But can you talk about how the opportunity became available at Furman?
Yeah. So I was at Limestone as my first college coaching job as an assistant coach at Limestone College. And then from there, I had an opportunity at University of Vermont. So I was at Vermont for 2 years. And then when Jen Johnson, stepped down as head coach, as it is in, college sports, the rest of the staff is, stepping down too. Right. And so I just started looking for jobs and looking for opportunities, and I loved South Carolina. I knew Furman, what a beautiful school it was, and a little bit about their program just from my time down at Limestone, which is only about 45 minutes away from there.
Right.
So I knew a bit about it from that, and I ended up just applying for the position, and it worked out. So I was at Furman for a year, and it was a phenomenal experience.
Right. And so, looking at your time there, it looks like, look, you were the defensive coordinator, goalies coach, and the recruiting coordinator. So it looks like you did a lot. Can you talk about, I guess, what were some of the biggest lessons you learned that year?
Yeah, well, I was really fortunate. Rachel Whitten, who's the head coach there, I was really fortunate that she just gave me so much room to work, and she gave me a lot of responsibility and trusted me a lot, which, especially now as a head coach, I've learned how that's not the easiest thing to do.
Right.
So I think for her, from that standpoint, I'm very grateful to her, because she really helped prepare me to be a head coach, in a sense of like learning by doing, and learning how, like, if we had a recruiting meeting, she'd be like, okay, you can run this meeting, and different things like that. So that was an incredible experience from that standpoint. And then also the fact that it was a newer program. They were only in the third varsity season, I believe. So we were still establishing a culture. You were still having to do a lot of skill development and work on that, and you were having to learn how to sell different things and how to sell a vision from a recruiting standpoint and all that, which we're running into here at Bucknell a lot, where I think about my time at Furman was massive, because we had to sell them on the future. We had to sell them on what they're going to do for this program, and how they're going to help write the history books, and how they're going to be a part of this legacy and all that stuff. And so here at Bucknell, when we're in a process of changing a culture and trying to build towards a future and things like that, I think that was, from a recruiting perspective, that year at Furman was one of the most important years I've ever had, just because I learned so much and learned how to recruit in different ways.
Right. So can you talk about how you ended up at Bucknell as the head coach?
Yeah. So basically loved Furman, loved Rachel, loved the staff, the girls, everything about it was great. But I also told Rachel, I said, hey, I do want to be a head coach, and so if something pops up that I'm interested in, I'm just going to apply, and I didn't have any really expectations, I guess you could say, for it. Right. Like, I was just saying, hey, this job looks like a good one. Throw my name in, see what happens.
Right.
And so I applied for the Bucknell position, and they offered me an interview. So I did a phone interview, and I was working Syracuse's camp at the time, so I did my phone interview in Gary Gates' office, and which was a cool experience. And he was my coach for when I played for Team Canada and stuff. So it's kind of funny how everything kind of came back full circle, I guess.
Right.
But so I did my phone interview, and this would have been in like late June, I guess it would have been. And it was the same year as World Cup, and I was assistant coach for the Welsh national team at the time. So, I said to him, I was like, hey, when are you guys trying to do on-campus interviews? And they said, in a week or 2 weeks. And I said, well, okay, well, I have to go to England in like 4 days for about the next 3.5 weeks.
Right.
So, they're like, all right, well, that doesn't really work with our timeline. So we kind of went our different ways, and I just really expected, okay, that was it, but it was a cool experience in the sense of getting, I had that phone interview. I talked to that panel, like I learned from it. I can use that experience going forward with my next one. And ironically, when we were in England, again, it'd been, 2-3 weeks, I hadn't heard anything from them. So I was like, okay, that's done.
Right.
And I knew they had some other people on campus and stuff. And we're warming up for a game, and someone just starts yelling, from on top of the bleachers down at the warm-up field. They're like, hey, Coach Steele, how'd your interview at Bucknell go? Huh. And I look up, and it's this guy wearing Belgium gear. And it turns out one of our players at Bucknell, Sophia Kleber, was a captain for Belgium, for the Belgium national team. So he's like, how'd your interview at Bucknell go? And I'm like, how does this guy even know that happened?
Right.
And he kind of, I'm like, I'm not their guy, but, it's a good experience. I'm sure they'll get someone great,
Right.
and then he's like, oh, well, we heard, you were on campus or whatever. I'm like, nah, just on the phone. He goes, oh, okay. And then literally, 2 days later, I got a call from them asking if when I got back from Europe, if I could come for an interview. So still to this day, I don't know if that guy somehow knew, if Soph's dad somehow knew more than I did at the time or what.
Right,
but,
right.
it just kind of came like that. So I got back from Europe, and then the next day I went out to Lewisburg for the interview, and I think took the job. I got offered the job the next day and started like 3 days later. So it was kind of a crazy week.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm curious with the lessons that you learned from Furman, with the being the recruiting coordinator and being able to communicate the vision. Now that you're a new head coach for Bucknell, how do you approach setting the tone for the team? How are you making sure that your current players or even new players coming in understand what it means to be a Bucknell lacrosse player?
I think that's something we're still working on, right? And it's still a process, and it takes time. You can't make change overnight, and you can't get get everyone to buy in all at once and things like that. So, I'm really, really happy with the direction we're going in, and I'm incredibly fortunate because the group of players we have are very open-minded and very great kids and very hardworking and motivated and focused, which is great. And I think a lot of that comes from, Bucknell is a very strong academic school. And so you get those very smart, those very headstrong, those very motivated student athletes at those types of schools.
Right.
So it's positive. It's been really, really positive in that sense because getting the buy-in hasn't been difficult, but it's still a process making those changes and getting them to adjust to a different style of play, getting them to adjust to a different type of culture, a different type of practice, a different type of environment, a different type of game plan, a different type of preparation, all those things. It's a process.
Right.
And, the way I like to do it and the way I'm comfortable doing it and used to doing it and all that stuff is very different than the way it was done before, and it's definitely not a case of right or wrong or anything like that. It's just a case of different. Right. So, for us, it's been that adjustment period, but the positive thing is we're starting to hit those points where we can say like, okay, we're right on the edge. We're right on the edge, and we just need that one more step to kind of get over the hump, So it's a really exciting time, and it was hard initially because you want that instant gratification, and you want, as a coach and as a player, you want to feel like all the work you're putting in is paying off. And sometimes short-sightedly, it's tough to see that, right? And it's hard to see as it's happening. But, as time goes on, you can see the vision, you can see the future. And the positive thing is our girls see that and our recruits see that. We have 3 girls that are listed in Inside Lacrosse Top 100 committed for 2020. And some very strong players. So I feel great about, our first recruiting class as a staff because we were able to get, great elite level players to see the vision that we're trying to sell. And we were able to sell, a bunch of those 2019 players that were already committed when we got here, sell them on the vision that we're trying to create and why this is still the best fit for them and still the right place for them to be, as well as the girls on the team.
And so when you come on board, as you mentioned, it's going to be tough to get some buy-in. It's not going to happen right away. What are some of the things that you've done to get the buy-in from, some of the girls that were already there?
I think for us, we try to make practice just the best part of their day. Right. So especially at a school where it is very heavy academically and it is a very difficult thing. Like we want this to be a time, whether it's, 2 hours, whatever it is during the day, that they don't have to stress about school and they don't have to stress about all that. And they can just enjoy getting out, moving around, being with their friends, and then, but all at the same time working towards, a common goal, so we do little things like we do, like mini teams. So all fall, everything that they do, they get points for, and every drill they can get points, and cleaning up the field, their little teams get points for every ball they pick up and different things like that. And we keep track of the points all through the fall. And there's a champion at the end of the, fall season. We do things trying to, make them be competitive and get them excited and get them used to stressful situations. So like, for example, after every drill, we call, as soon as any drill ends, we go to an 8-meter spot. We have 1 shooter, 2 defenders, and a goalie, and they have to take an 8-meter. And if the shooter scores, then the defense is running a sprint. If the defense stops them, then the offense is running a sprint, and different things like that, to just try to build competition and build excitement and get them, excited about practice and excited about competing and all that. So
gotcha. And so I'm just curious, with these mini teams, you said, at the end of the fall, you count up all the points, there will be a champion. Yeah. What is the champion team get, or what happens to the losers?
Yeah, we have a trophy that's on a big base, and we put a plaque for every year, so the
gotcha.
team, whatever the team name is, they get a plaque for every year. And this is another thing that Coach Clark did when I was at Limestone, and Coach Witten did when I was at Furman, that I kind of stole and brought with me, is, those teams that they're in, those team names never change. And so it's kind of another kind of subgroup inside the team. So when they come back, after graduating a couple of years down the road, you can kind of say like, oh, I was a part of this team, but I was also a part of this mini team,
right?
And it's just kind of another thing to bond them together down the road. So
gotcha. Makes sense. So let's quickly touch on practice, what a practice is like for you guys. Can you walk us through what a typical in-season practice is like?
Yeah, we try to go, my view on it is I want us to go as fast and as intense as possible the whole time. And that means we don't have to be out there that long, so I think, we say to the girls all the time, like, we're not on any type of time limit. We don't have to be out here for X amount of time. So if you go hard and we get what we need to get done in an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half, then that's all the time it took.
Right.
And if you're dragging, if you're going slow, if we have to do things longer, if you're not focused and we're out here an hour 45, 2 hours, 2:15, whatever, then that's on you guys, kind of thing. Right. So most of our practices are designed to be right around an hour and a half, an hour 45, unless we're doing like scout or different things like that, where there's a little bit more standing and talking and all that. But
right.
So normally show up, they get a dynamic stretch in, and then we always do some kind of stick work, at least 1 stick work drill, a lot of times maybe 2 stick work drills. Sometimes we'll do just kind of like some kind of non-competitive stick work, non-marked, just get the sticks going, work on different things, work on something that we may need for whatever the install is that week, or something that we've been struggling with during games or practices. And then we may add something competitive to it. But all the drills that we do, we try to, have a purpose behind and try to work on a skill set that, either we're struggling with or we know we're going to need for the upcoming game or whatever it is. And then, so once we've done the stick work, we'll do one of those pressure 8 meters, we call them, that we talked about. And then we'll go from that. We do a lot of position split stuff. So a lot of skill group, position groups, focus stuff. So like the attack, we'll go do, normally it's some kind of shooting or dodging the shooting or feeding or whatever it is. The defense will go work on, footworks or approaches or checking or clearing. something along those lines. And then the middies will normally send with one group or the other. And we kind of flip that around a little bit. And then when we finish that position work, another pressure aid mirror, then it's generally some kind of, it kind of varies. Then we'll just go into normal drills. We try to do a lot of transition stuff, a lot of run and gun stuff, a lot of stuff to just keep heart rates up, get some of that hidden conditioning in there, and stuff that's going to maybe make the players a little bit uncomfortable so that they're kind of comfortable being uncomfortable. So we do a lot of transition stuff. We do a lot of tight quarter stuff, so that, defenders are used to keeping pressure on the offensive players, and the offensive players are used to being pressured and being in tight quarters and having to protect and different things like that. And then, so we'll normally do one or two of those drills. And then that's when we get into our more, game specific type drills. So, we do a lot of one possession games, we call them, where it's like a draw to a settled possession, ride, settled possession, ride, and then we reset it. So that's kind of how we practice our rides and clears, and how we get a little bit of 7-on-7 work in there. And then we may end with 7v7. We may end with some kind of more transition into 7v7 or some more full field type stuff. But
gotcha. And so, especially since you're all about keeping the pace up, is there a practice plan that's shared with the players beforehand?
Nope. So we don't share the practice plan with the players beforehand, because it's kind of one of those things of get used to adapting,
Gotcha.
Right? Learn to adjust, learn to adapt. The other thing I found is when you share practice plans with the team beforehand, sometimes if there's a drill that they really don't like, or if you have a drill that they know has a lot of running in it or something like that, then that kind of looms over their head for the whole practice. Right. Or they maybe try to save themselves a little bit more because they know they have that coming at the end or whatever it may be. Right. So for us, we just say, hey, we'll sometimes, if it's like bad weather's coming or whatever, and we want to just roll through things even quicker, we may tell them ahead of time, all right, this is what we're doing, be ready to go, right. Or if it's cold or raining or different things like that. But for the most part, it's just they learn to adjust, and they find out right before the drill happens. Just like in a game, you're not necessarily going to know what the other team's going to do right away or what to expect.
Right. And so how do you guys as a coaching staff decide on what drills you guys are going to focus on during a practice?
We have a meeting every single day, just to go over practice and plan practice and things like that. And what I try to do is I try to say, hey, let's not talk about practice at all until that meeting, so that everyone can kind of get their own ideas together. Right. Or maybe if, Princess Abel, who runs our defense, right, if I'm like, hey, I really think our defense needs to work on this, can you start thinking about some drills you may want to do? Or with Taylor Sendall, who does our offense, I'll say the same thing, right? Or they may come in and say, hey, I want to work on this, think about, if you have anything, right? So it's a very collaborative effort for us. Everyone kind of plays a big role and has a say in what we do. So basically we have that meeting. I say, hey, what do you guys want to do? What do we want to work on? What do we need to accomplish here today? And they may say, hey, I want to do this, and throughout a drill, and someone may have a better drill for it or whatever. So we try to keep it collaborative. We try to keep everyone involved. We try to, we'll spend a lot of time looking up drills or creating drills, or things like that. I think that's something I learned from Scott Tucker at Limestone. He was very, very good at just making drills for different situations. So I think that's something that I'm decent at now, in large part thanks to him, because he was very good at just well, does anyone have a drill for this? And we're like, no. He goes, okay, I got it. And he'll just draw one up,
Just make one up on the spot,
Yeah, exactly. So we do a bit of that, but then we also do a lot of, defensively, we've started doing a ton of stuff from basketball drills, adapted basketball drills, and for transition stuff, a lot of our transition stuff is ice hockey drills, because ice hockey is basically all transition,
right,
and even little things like, a bunch of times this year we had the team play like touch rugby beforehand because we watched, there's a great series on Amazon Prime about the New Zealand All Blacks, and so they got into it that way. But we also realized that like rugby and the way they move the ball and the way they have to keep their positioning and recognize pressure early and move the ball quickly and things like that is a lot like the clear, and is a lot of decision making and recognition and teamwork and stuff like that. So a lot of times for warm-ups, we'd have the girls play touch rugby and just get them used to seeing and recognizing and making decisions on time. So
right. So I'm curious. You mentioned, you'll try to incorporate like a basketball drill. I know this might be difficult to sort of describe over the phone, but can you give us an example of a drill that you've taken directly from basketball?
I think a lot of it is just like closeout approach type stuff, right? So if it's defensively, it's closeouts to approaches to recovers, and the footwork piece of it's very similar. 1v1 defense is very similar, the same,
right.
All that. So, I think in a lot of cases, sports are sports. Being an athlete is being an athlete, and then the rest of it is just making it fit your sport. Right. So we'll take, how do they play? How does, like Coach K, we found a bunch of drills from Coach K. How does Coach K teach Duke to play defense? How does Coach Cal teach Kentucky to play defense? Or how do they box out for rebounds? We'll do those on draws,
right.
And that type of stuff. So I think it's just kind of, if you're not, as to be the best possible coach you can be, to be the best possible team you can be, you have to use all your resources.
Right.
And if you're sticking strictly to lacrosse, you're not using all your resources.
Right. Yeah.
Right? If you're only talking to lacrosse coaches, if you're only looking for inspiration from play-wise, tactics-wise, drill-wise, practice-wise, all that stuff in lacrosse, you're destroying the bulk of your resources.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. And then so finally, our last two questions, and then I'll get you out of here. Can you talk real quick about how you prepare for an upcoming opponent? What does that week look like? Let's say it's a Monday and you have a game on Saturday.
Right.
What are you guys doing that week to prepare your team?
So normally how we look at it is, Monday and Tuesday, we kind of try to keep specific to our program. We try to use, especially Monday to work on, things that we know we may need to work on from the last game. Right. Oh, we had big problems with this. Let's work on it. Mondays especially, we try not even to think about the next opponent. We try to think about ourselves. We try to think about the last game. We try to think about just becoming a better team and getting to where we need to be. Tuesdays kind of vary. Again, a lot of development, a lot of focus on ourselves there. And then, we may start putting stuff for the next opponent in. But, sometimes we'll tell the team, okay, hey, pay attention because this is something that we're going to need for next week. Or sometimes we won't tell them, so that then when they see it or when they see it's part of the game plan, they're like, oh, that's just like this one drill we did. So it just kind of depends on what it is, what the situation is, all that stuff. Wednesday is a little bit more of the same. And then Thursday is when we really start hitting it hard. For our scouting and things like that. We'll do our film meetings, our scouting report meetings Thursday before practice. Most of our drills that we do on Thursdays will be geared towards whatever the game plan is or whatever we need to be prepared for with our next opponent. And then 77, we'll start our scout stuff. And we have a phenomenal scout team. That's one of the things we've done to try to make everyone feel like they have a role is, some of the players that may not be playing as much during the games, we, put them in charge of being on the scout team and, hey, you're in charge of being, number 7 from Loyola. right? You be the best number 7 from Loyola you could be, right? And you run their plays and you do her moves and you do that perfectly. So even if on Saturday you don't play a single minute in the game, you helped us win, or you helped us be competitive or whatever it is, right? So we do that. And the other thing we've started doing is we have the scout team. The scout team wears these lime green jerseys. So just lime green strictly because we knew no other team is that color. And so we know, okay, if you're wearing this green jersey, this isn't your teammate. If they're wearing that green jersey, that's the other team, right? And it's just getting used to looking at them as, for lack of a better word, maybe these faceless players, where you just have to go out there and compete, right? And different things like that. So, that's Thursday, and then Friday is a little bit more of the same as Thursday. We try to keep it a little bit shorter. And, Friday is also when we normally do our, so we do normally transitions, like our rides and players transition stuff. We'll do situation stuff if there's anything we feel like we need to work on. A little bit more of the 77 scout, and then some man up, man down stuff, and, get out of there hopefully rested.
Right.
So.
Gotcha. Well, Coach, listen, we're going a little bit longer than I told you it would be, so I appreciate you taking the time.
No problem at all.
This has been a great conversation, but there's one question I've asked everybody who's come on the show. What are 3 things everyone should be doing every day to get better at whatever it is they do? It doesn't have to just be lacrosse.
Yeah, I think that's a tough one, but I'll steal a line from my dad. My dad used to always say, you need 3 things in life to be successful, and that's intensity, knowledge, and resources. And you can be, but his big line is, you can be successful with 2 of them as long as one of them's intensity. Right? So I think the biggest thing with that is, like whatever you do, whatever you're doing, do it to the best of your ability, right? Don't go through the motions in anything, because you never know what's going to be your ticket, right? You never know what you're going to fall in love with. You never know what you're going to learn from different situations and things like that. And that's why, we have a guy that runs our table and does all of our timeouts and penalty times and things like that. His name's Benny. He works here at Bucknell in our fitness center, and then he also does our stuff. But we said to Vin takes so much pride in, keeping penalty times and being the horn guy and counting timeouts and things like that. And I said, hey, it's really, really admirable just to see, it's not the most glamorous job in the world, but you just do it like it's the most important thing you've ever done.
Right.
And so I think those types of things have always stuck with me. Like anything you do, anything that's worth doing, like do it to the best of your ability, do it full go, never back up, never, never cut corners on it. And then, and if you do that, you'll be fine no matter what.
Right. Awesome. Well, Coach, listen, like I said, thank you so much for taking the time. I really enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate you coming on.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the GameChanger Lacrosse Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Uvoli. You can follow me on Twitter at Joe Uvoli. You can find more episodes of the GameChanger Lacrosse Podcast on The Season at theseason.gc.com. If you like the podcast, please take a second to give it a positive review on iTunes. This helps more people find the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at GC Sports. And if you're a coach, a parent, or you run a travel or club team, check out GameChanger Team Manager in the App Store. It's an essential, all-in-one scheduling and communication app for lacrosse coaches and parents. GameChanger Team Manager is free, it's easy to use, and it doesn't serve ads. Learn more at gc.com/team manager. Until next time, keep working and keep getting better.